Hello, and welcome to another live chapter reading of Forbidden Moon by C.R. Robertson, as presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Prologue. Ancient vampire legends tell the story of the beginning of the immortal races. One of them described how black metal gates twisted and corroded, straining under the weight of all the evil souls languishing in hell. It had never been meant to hold so many creatures, yet heaven had become more exclusive, only letting the truly worthy pass through the pearly gates. Hades, king of the damned, surveyed his kingdom from his throne deep in the heart of the fields of everlasting pain and damnation. Too long his hellspawn had been locked down here, far from the world of man. They were created from every evil deed and action carried out on earth. Some hellspawn were the manifestation of pain, others an expression of anger or loathing. The list was endless, the deadly sins shaping the many different hellspawn species, not to mention the different rings of hell that had accommodated them. His brother Zeus championed his creation of humanity, the great experiment of souls having a physical experience. He gave them a world to live in, sent his children to teach them to hunt for food and build themselves shelter. As self-proclaimed king of Olympus, he refused to let his brothers and sisters help him shape the bountiful world that he placed his blessings on like a benevolent father. His affection created jealousy in Olympus, each god and goddess craving warmth and adoration from his pets on earth. Souls, when they resided in the spirit realms, were pure and filled with grace. When they fell to experience a human existence, temptation was waiting for them, courtesy of Hades and his sins. Every time the Olympian council met, another of Kronos and Rhea's children found a way to distort Zeus's precious humans. Poseidon created the sea hags who tormented the oceans, dragging souls deep into the watery depths to enslave them. In a fit of rage, Hera visited the wedding feast of one of Zeus's many lovers. She bit into her finger and placed a drop of her blood into the wine, creating the first vampires. The groom and his brother drank the wine and were reborn that night, slaughtering everyone in their beds, including his unfaithful bride. Witnessing the wrath of her sister and the power of her monsters, Hestia forged together primordial clays that the gods used to create species, one a wolf and one a man. The hybrids were designed to kill and destroy Hera's abominations. The man would walk under the light of the sun, the wolf under the shine of the moon. Werewolves. Yet her plan was thwarted when the species intermingled instead of annihilating each other. Hecate secretly sprinkled a little magic dust and created the witches who cast her spells under the light of the moon. It allowed her to visit the earth realm without anyone realizing she was there. The new species banded together for centuries, sensing they were different from the humans who roamed the planet. Then they were torn apart after another Olympian council meeting, their alliance deemed to be too powerful. The hellspawn impatiently bided their time in hell, waiting for the day they would invade Earth and take the abundant land for themselves. Demeter was the last child of Kronos and Rhea. She'd grown to love Earth, flooding the land with her fertility. For many centuries, she watched the petty rivalries of her siblings, the earth suffering as their creatures stalked it, draining resources and creating more hellspawn through greed and hatred. Life could not exist without death, the summer only arriving after the winter. Demeter visited Earth, disguised as a wise woman. She released her gift into the world, deep into an ancient forest. Love. The only force powerful enough to defeat the hatred and war that ravished Earth was love. She left it buried in the forest, sealing it with an enchantment. It would awaken when two souls, capable of compassion and understanding, accepted each other with open hearts. She glanced around the forest, snarls from Hestia's werewolves vibrating through the air. They were hunting a vampire who jumped through tree branches, her eyes wide with terror. Demeter closed her eyes when the sound of the attack made shivers race down her spine. The tiny heart deep in the ground was fragile, its existence relying on fate to intervene and bring the right souls together to find this place. May the blessings of our father and mother protect this place, Demeter whispered. The hope of this world rests here. With a puff of light, she returned to Olympus, her secret growing under a tree. Centuries passed, and she gave up hope that either side of the supernatural war could produce a soul that would accept her gift. Then one day, the tides of the war turned. The last gate holding the hellspawn broke, releasing the horde from the depths of hell. They didn't discriminate in their victims: human, vampire, werewolf, witch, sea hag. Hades finally joined the two realms as hell ascended to earth. The two sides of a war that spanned centuries finally realized that the only way to defeat their mutual enemy was to form an alliance. The tiny heart beat frantically, desperately needing to fulfill its purpose. The time was right for the enchantment to flourish. All it needed was two worthy souls. Chapter 1. Tasha. Magic was real. It pumped through my veins in a tribal beat that screamed for release. I wanted to lash out at the enemies at our door, to destroy them for daring to attack us tonight. Levi leapt through the air, his foot connecting with the head of the hellspawn. He wielded his sword as an extension of his arm, bringing it down through the exposed neck. The hellspawn had been relentless, their energy higher during the dark nights of the new moon. It corresponded to when the wolves were at their weakest. My muscles tensed and my stomach tied into a knot as I watched the monitors feeding us images from the battle outside. Sabine moved around the room with radar, activating the UV lights to try and force the hellspawn back. They're sending their stronger ones in who can withstand the light longer, Sabine called over her shoulder. I gripped our daughter tighter and bounced her gently against my shoulder, the feel of her fine hair against my cheek calming me. She had every single vampire and wolf in this base twisted around her tiny little chubby finger. Several hellspawn attacked Levi at once, and his wolf broke free. Persephone turned to stare at the monitor as if sensing her father's perilous situation. Her eyes shone golden, and the hellspawn pouncing at Levi disintegrated into black flakes of ash. Mum automatically started to fuss, trying to ensure that no one else in the control room saw what our tiny daughter had accomplished. All the witches agreed that she was powerful. Her aura filled with a new color that denoted her hybrid status. Her pacifier moved slowly in and out of her mouth as she watched Levi. Every time an enemy got too close to him, it disintegrated, as if touched by the hand of death. Whatever powers Persephone wielded, they did not appear in any of the witches' grimoires or the archives of the lycans or vampires. She was an anomaly who didn't like either of her parents being attacked or hurt. Levi returned last week with huge gouges down his back from battling a new species of hellspawn. Persephone's eyes had glowed golden, and his flesh knitted together in front of the medical team's watchful gazes. They put it down to Levi's dominant wolf genes, because who would ever suspect a tiny baby? "Shh, my precious," I whispered, stroking Persephone's hair. "Give her to me," Mum said, stretching her arms out. At times like these, she tended to walk with her, so that no one ever saw the magic we were trying to hide. I could mask mine, but she was a baby and acting on instinct. "They're getting stronger," Radar muttered, activating the next round of UV weapons. I promised Levi that I would stay out of the fighting, but even when I could see that they were struggling out there. Mom had taken Persephone to her private medical laboratory that had monitors built into it. She and Dad had customized it over the past few months to allow them secrecy for their work. I twisted my hair up and put one of the vampire masks on to disguise who I was, lifting 2 swords and blasters on my way through the weapons room. Since my magic fully activated, I rarely needed weapons, but I'd learned a few tricks recently in training and wanted to put them to use. The hellspawn radiated heat, and the battle conditions were horrendous, causing fatigue in our fighters. My fingers gripped the handles of the swords, and the blasters were strapped to my legs in case I needed them later. The witches used incantations, but the magic I harnessed worked slightly differently. I allowed the energy to flow through me, the electrical currents of it making my hair move under the mask and the small hairs on the back of my neck to stand at attention. I embraced it and allowed it to guide me to the strongest hellspawn. One of the hellspawn I targeted looked like a zombie rhinoceros, with lava dripping from the tips of its horn. It pawed the ground, head dipping, as it prepared to charge at me. My magic crept out of me, snaking down my arms and through my fingers. I itched to touch the creature, destroy the darkness in it with my golden energy. Instead, I allowed the energy to flow down into my swords, using my vampire agility to spring it out of its path and flipping back to land on its back. My blades dug deep into the beast, unleashing my attack without anyone ever realizing what was happening. It squealed, trying to buck from me as its eyes rolled back and red foam dripped down its mouth. I whispered the blessings the witches had ingrained in me to purify a soul and dragged my swords from the creature before dropping to the ground. Head shaking, the monster rampaged through the battle, spearing other hellspawn as the darkness and light fought inside it. Near the edge of the forest, it stopped suddenly and its head twisted to look at the sky. It exploded in a putrid mass, covering everyone close to it. "Is Tasha out here?" Levi demanded, his voice echoing in my earpiece. "She was in command last time I saw her," Radar replied, covering for me. "I'm going to fucking strangle her," Levi grated in that low, growly tone that made the beast in me purr with delight. I targeted the hellspawn closest to me, moving across the battlefield in a wide arc to avoid Levi before he dragged my ass back into the base and handcuffed me to our bed. He'd already done it before when I pissed him off by taking too many risks in an attack. My sword swung again and again, every time infecting the hellspawn with golden light that they were allergic to. I was too busy fighting one of the 7-foot-tall hellspawn that looked like they were ogres that I didn't see the risk to my right. A blade cut the hand off that had been reaching for me, and a strong arm snaked around my waist to lift me out of the way. Levi grabbed one of my swords, infused with my magic, and launched it at the ogre hellspawn to impale it through the center of its forehead. He used the other to decapitate the other hellspawn that had sneaked up on me. I tried to look away before, but his furious gaze bored into me. "This doesn't look like the command room on the base," he barked. Persephone was using her powers, I confessed. I guessed as much when the hellspawn started to disintegrate. He hauled my swords out of the dead creatures and handed them to me. "Get your sexy ass inside before I spank it in front of an audience." My panties tightened because Levi alone possessed the power to make me weak in the knees, even in the middle of a war. I shook my head. "Not tonight. There are too many of them." He decapitated another hellspawn that launched itself at us. "What if they're doing this to draw you out?" I refused to watch my mate be slaughtered. I infused my sword with energy and flung it at another rampaging rhinoceros. It reared up and let out a baleful wail. Levi's dark gaze bored into mine. "We'll discuss this later," he said, his top lip lifting in a sneer. I had no doubt that we would, because he was a possessive asshole who thought it was his job to wrap me up in bubble wrap. One of the flying hellspawn was swooping over our soldiers, vomiting that horrendous red liquid that burned through the skin. "Give me a boost up," I asked. Levi gave me his best glare of disapproval before he lifted me on his shoulders. "Ready?" he shouted. The magic unfurled deep in my stomach like a flower unraveling in the sun. It permeated through me until every part of me was alive with the sensation. "Yep," I called back. Levi transformed as he leapt up, throwing me into the air as his black wolf landed on a hellspawn to eviscerate it. The tips of my toes settled on the back of the massive ancient bird. I stabbed my sword into it, my energy warring with the darkness as I slowly took control of the creature. A storm gathered over the forest, not far from the base. Electrical currents flowed through the sky, and I let the golden energy flow from me into the wind. It infused into the storm, every drop of rain that landed on the hellspawn burning them, every gust of wind draining them of energy. Levi had warned me not to use my powers overtly, as it would draw a target on my back. Tonight I became one with the storm, using it as a conduit to destroy our enemy. "What the fuck is happening out here?" someone said over the communications network. "The hellspawn are melting." A smile touched my lips as I slowly pulled my blade out of the back of the massive bird. In my mind, I visualized the roof at our base, and it changed its direction to take me there. It landed on the roof and sat watching me when I climbed off. It was different to the other creatures and intelligent in its eyes that called to me. I moved to where the injury was, covering it with my hand and allowing healing to flow as the witches had taught me. My golden energy mingled with it. I would fight and kill to save the innocent, but I refused to slaughter a creature that had been enslaved by the hellspawn. The red glow died in its eyes as it turned black, and the red acid stopped dripping from the side of its mouth. It watched me throughout, flying away when his wound had healed over. I felt a familiar prickling on my flesh, as if someone was watching me. I scanned the horizon and felt him before I saw him. It had to be the Master Hellspawn, who stood alone at the edge of the forest, surveying the battle. His creatures were in pain and dying from my storm, but he stood impassively and continued to stare at the scene. I crouched low on the roof and observed him since he was occupied. All right, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the chapter reading. Good night.